exchange listing for crypto projects is no longer the end goal. Having an ETF is probably what every crypto project would want to do, that it has gotten that level of trust that now its distribution is essentially available through traditional means as well,
Yeah.
bringing more liquidity into the system. Do you see that happening? Why? Because right now I see Bitcoin as perhaps just the start to it. What stops, say, Ethereum or I don't know, just for the sake of discussion, Dogecoin becoming an ETF. But you get my point, right? Like, so why can't this also happen for other
Yeah, yeah,
cryptocurrencies?
yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Web3 Normies. Prashanth is calling me from a very nice looking room. Prashanth has also admitted that he has nothing to do with how nice it looks. So will um, we will give credit where credit is due outside of this call. But Prash, how have you been? How has the market been treating you? It looks like things are looking upwards, and all my uh, degen trader friends tell me that this is the start of a bull cycle. uh, what are your slightly more educated thoughts on this?
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's good. Definitely, the market bounced from 25 to 30K on Bitcoin. Primarily, I guess, driven by the ETF news, right? I would, I would say we're still very early days to call this the beginning of another bull market. I think we have a lot of headwinds in ETFs in terms of AI as well. Not just the hype, but also it bringing more productivity into workforce, and the even unemployment and all those numbers also look fairly strong. There is still a lot of liquidity in the market, so there are certain good things, a lot of good things, but at the same time we are still in like a very high rate environment, and I do still feel that we will not bounce back to all-time highs anytime soon. I think it will be like at least another 12 to 18 months before we can get very exuberant. If you look at the on the ground things, and I'm sure you must have seen a lot as well in terms of hiring or like spending and all that stuff, not just within startups but even in terms of general people. I think people are becoming also like a bit more cautious than what they were 2 years ago, right? So yeah, I think all of that points to me that this is good. I think definitely a shot in the arm, but too early to call it as the beginning of another bull run.
Thank you for that. I feel like some of the people kind of making plans already. Don't hold your breath on it just yet. So Prash, everyone that I talk to is talking about a movement of cryptos interest from the west to the east, right? On the one hand, you have American regulators clamping down on exchanges and exchanges looking at other jurisdictions and barring Binance, which seems to have problems in some EU countries as well. There seems to be a concentrated effort to really go after these guys. Coinbase put out a really interesting infographic of sorts where they said that the number of times that we mentioned all the things that you are saying wrong about us on the S1 before we went public is these many times. Where is all this coming from? So for you as a observer and kind of looking at the whole macro trend of this space, what's going on? And where and given how US's regulatory positions on these emerging things are taken as seriously as they are, what does it mean for the rest of the world, especially with progressives like, say, Singapore or Hong Kong or Dubai, for that matter? So if you
Hmm.
paint this nice regulatory picture, I guess a lot of people working in crypto or kind of involved in it will get some clarity based on what you've been observing so far. So what's the
Yeah.
US stance on this, and uh, how does how does its position take effect on all the progressive countries that are here?
Yeah. See, I mean, just taking a step back, right? I think where we are in terms of evolution of digital assets as well, I think we have hit the ceiling pretty much in terms of how much retail can participate and push this, right? So I think the next wave, or at least in the next few cycles, we will have to see a lot more institutional capital coming in. And institutional capital does not mean your market makers or your Alameda researchers of the world. It's more,
Hmm.
asset managers, pension funds, and all the likes, who together hold like trillions of dollars of wealth, right? And can move markets like with just a few percentages. For them to participate, you need a lot more regulatory clarity, right? And that is where a lot of I think force and push, etc., is coming to generate this clarity, so we can move to the next cycle within this digital asset revolution as well. Within that, the feeling always was that, at least even in my mind, that US will probably lead the way, because it has always been the hub for innovation. And even if they have like two parties always at loggerheads and debt ceiling crisis, etc., they've always been supportive of innovation and trying to do the right thing from that standpoint. Where it has surprised me a lot is that they have shown in the last 6 months, at least in the first half of this year, that they are treating crypto as like an enemy, right? Pretty much.
Mm.
And now I think it is more an individual, that is Gary Gensler, who is making it his job to treat crypto and malign crypto this way. I don't think it is a very systemic thing within US, right? And of course, I mean, crypto is different. It threatens the establishment. It tries to disintermediate, which kind of hits the pockets of a lot of people. And US is all about capitalism, right? So everyone thinks for themselves. So I think there are a lot of, therefore, noises out against crypto. What will happen? So what that has done is that US is pretty much on the back foot. You see startups wanting to move out of that. Although I did speak to two very large funds in the last week, one of them the largest fund, the other one of the fastest growing funds. One of them has moved, set up an office outside, and the other one is still there. And I spoke to both of them, and they are like, they still feel that in 5 years or 7 years, once crypto becomes a lot more mature and institutions, are in this, US will figure out its way, right? Because that's pretty much how US has always been. So there is this 5-year period, however, between now and then, where it could be very volatile from a regulatory standpoint, specific to the US. And in, I think, 18 to 24 months, even the SEC chair is up for renewal. And if Gary goes away, then this might just become like a lot more easier to manage. And there is a stable coin bill coming out. So I think, look, I mean, long story short, I think US will figure out its way. It might take longer than people anticipated. But if like the largest funds out there are thinking that they'll figure out a way in the next 5 years, then I think it should be okay.
On the point of Gary Gensler, right? Like there has been so many so many videos of him kind of praising something like Algorand and calling Bitcoin not a Bitcoin. And I think, did he say Ethereum? I'm not sure. Maybe he did say that BTC is not a security. And then there is news of Gary Gensler applying to be a part of as a board advisor for Binance. So when all of these news are confirmed and very clearly out in the open, why does somebody like his stand still matter in these policy decisions?
Yeah, because so Gary, yeah, I mean, all of these things are right, and he's been asked multiple times if Ether is a security, and he has not given a convincing answer one way or the other. And yeah, all of these news are coming out, right? And even when he was at MIT, he was like a big proponent of blockchain and crypto. Since he's been with the establishment, the talk has been that he is very close to certain people in Congress, and I think it's Elizabeth Warren who has also made it her purpose to kind of go after crypto. And somehow, like reading between the lines, people feel that Gary, if he does the things that the establishment wants, then he could be up for a Treasury Secretary role down the line, right? And so that is where this is coming from, right? And why it matters is because SEC still rules the roost when it comes to everything to do with markets, right? So I don't think Congress has like veto rights on what the SEC wants to do, and they have like pretty much a very free hand, and the SEC chairman and gets to wield that hand, right? So therefore, it is quite important in terms of how he thinks and what he's putting out.
Got it. So it's more the chair itself rather than the person that that does this. So you're saying that US will figure itself out, the institutions will come in a big way, and then there would be some sort of regulatory clarity, because the capitalistic world is largely run by the capitalistic organizations that are there, which we will come to
That's the
in a
hope.
bit. right?
That's the hope. Yeah.
Got it. And then there are these progressive stances that are taken. Like, for example, there was a news about Hong Kong's government pushing banks to actually work with crypto companies. Where does this contrast come from? And then why? So I guess maybe some amount of touch points on why these sort of markets are embracing crypto kind of almost openly. And then
Yeah.
how does a US stance affect these geographies, because they are also very close to the United States from a geopolitical standpoint. So
Yeah.
where do you see this coming from, and how do you see US's confusion affecting these things?
Yeah, I think it's just, other jurisdictions being opportunistic and taking advantage of regulatory arbitrage with respect to the US. Ultimately, it comes down to what view you have about Web3 and DeFi and all these things, right? And I mean, of course, we will say this aloud as many times, but looks like when some of the regions are beginning to appreciate the fact that Web3 is here to stay. It will be huge, and there will be immense amount of capital flowing through Web3. Plus, most importantly, it could become the source of the setup of a new world order, right? Given if, like, for example, Bitcoin goes to 1 million, then you will have trillionaires out there, right? And they can, and that pretty much creates a new world order. And then if, like, Web3 starts becoming bigger and bigger, then the traditional TradFi capital starts coming in, and whoever is at the helm becomes like the movers and shakers in the world, right? And this is pretty much what is being like embraced by other jurisdictions. The ones that are like at the forefront of this are UK right now. Then there is Dubai, plus ADGM, which is Abu Dhabi. Then there is Hong Kong, right? So these three have like put out consultation papers, and also have like look much more further along in terms of setting up regulatory frameworks and inviting startups and institutions to partake in such a framework, right? Now, it's very interesting when it comes to all of these three countries, right? If you look at Hong Kong, it's coming out of like a very deep shutdown through COVID. It is pretty much, it lost a lot of personnel and capital to places like Singapore. And it definitely wants to kind of like, get some of it back, and also, restart. So doing that with Web3 kind of puts it back on the map. And they've also been encouraging banks like HSBC to open bank accounts for crypto exchanges. So this is the unheard of, that a regulator is coaxing the banks to open accounts for crypto exchanges, right? That's always the other way around. So that's Hong Kong. UK is also very interesting. If you look at the economic situation in UK, it has been on a downtrend for the last 20 years, right? And ever since Brexit, their productivity has gone down, their inflation has gone up, and it's pretty much in doldrums. London is what is pretty much sustaining the UK economy. And I think even the government, right up to the PM Rishi Sunak, recognizes this, right? And they want to be seen again as a hub for innovation. And if finance has a new chapter, they want to be at the forefront of it, as how they have been in TradFi, right? And so it completely makes sense for them. I was there for like 3 weeks, spoke to a lot of lawyers, regulators, etc., and they are making all the right noises. And if UK gets it right, then I think UK can very much become the hub for Web3, because it's a much more non-taboo kind of a place than other places like your Cayman or Hong Kong or even Dubai, for that matter, right? So I think they are like in a very good position, but it's desperation that has been driving them into this, which is great for us. The third place is Dubai. Dubai again wants to kind of be like at the forefront. I think of the three, this has done the most work in terms of attracting Web3 based folks. The only challenge with Dubai is that, to an extent also with Hong Kong, is that because it's still like fairly controlled either by like a few people or like the CCP. I think there'll always be a part of the brain which will question how sustainable this is over a period of time, which is where again UK is like very different from that standpoint. But I think these are the three main jurisdictions which are like looking to take the forefront. And yeah, man, it's great. I think they all are embracing this. And if US does not get its act together, it does not matter for crypto, it does not matter for Web3. And it will just move on, and we have these very formidable other countries at the forefront.
Did you see the A16Z move to UK? Did you see that coming? Because there were rumblings that it may be Dubai, it may be India from a deal flow standpoint. There was a lot of conversation around it being more to the west, but
Yeah.
more to the east, and to see them suddenly show up in in UK, and no less than Sriram Krishnan leading that from front was quite surprising to me. But did you know? And did you know that? And how did you react when you saw the news?
So I knew that they were looking. I wasn't sure if they were going to take the plunge, and so yeah. So therefore, it came as a surprise that they did what they did. They were apparently considering UK, Singapore, and I think Dubai, not India.
Mm,
I mean, we love India, but then it has its limitations, right? So it makes
exactly.
complete sense.
Yeah.
So these places, and they decide on London. I think for multiple reasons. One is that London is the hub for TradFi. Two is that it's got a robust fintech platform already, right? And it has like decent startups coming up, even in like Web3 now. They invested in this AI platform called Genis. And of course, they must have spoken to the government and the regulator, and people like Rishi themselves must have like opened their arms to invite them, right? So, and the
Yes.
familiarity with the law and the language, not too far from the US, I guess, right? So, I think all of those things probably tilted them to go with UK.
Right. I mean, it was quite nice to see. And then maybe suddenly UK is on the map for many more crypto people right now to go and head there. There's already a big conference that happens there, but now I'm assuming there'll be a lot more interest as well.
Yeah, funnily on
Um,
that, now so token 2049 last time was happened in Singapore and in London, right? And London was like pretty much a washout in
mm,
terms, and Singapore was like a massive hit where we were, right?
right.
I think it will like in London this time, like when they do this, it will become like it will be a lot more trendier, and I think there'll be a lot more uptake.
Really? You think that switch is going to happen?
Uh, Look, given how bad last time was, it will be definitely better.
Okay, Prash, going to ask you a finance question. I have no idea about this. It's not the first time I'm hearing about this. I've been hearing about this ETF thing for the last, I don't know, 5 years now. That, oh, someone's launching an ETF, someone's launching an ETF. It's almost kind of come to this whole place of, the boy who cried wolf, that whether, whether it will happen or not. But my question to you is, what is an ETF in absolutely simple, non Wall Streety terms? What is an ETF, and who runs it? What is it meant for? Who is it meant for? And why? Maybe even before getting into the crypto side of things, just a
Yeah,
basic
yeah.
primer on what an ETF is would be quite useful.
Yeah. So see, ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. Basically, from an Indian standpoint, it's not too dissimilar from mutual fund, right? So what
Mm,
happens in an ETF is it's a regulated instrument, which is very important, and it basically if say it's a Bitcoin ETF, then you get exposure to the asset class of Bitcoin by just trading in and out of this ETF. So you're buying a share in a fund at that point, like a Bitcoin ETF, and you're just like going in and out of it. So if you say, for example, in India, you can buy a mutual fund that is tracking the Sensex, right? Or a separate basket, right? So what it does is for investors, both retail and institutional, it gives you access to a particular underlying without having to bother about like picking up that underlying. And when it comes to something like Bitcoin, it's even more important because now you don't have to worry about understanding much about Bitcoin or self custody. And because this will be regulated, so you don't have to worry about like its regulatory status either, because you can go directly in and out of a Bitcoin. What it does is before we get into Bitcoin again, so I think ETFs as a concept started sometime in like late 80s or early 90s in
mm,
I think in Canada, if I'm not mistaken.
mm,
And it's just proliferated. And even while you can do Sensex and S&P, like different types of ETFs slash mutual funds, I think gold is like a very good comparison where before we get into Bitcoin ETF, right? So
mm,
previously, all of us used to I mean, Indians love gold, physical gold. But then if you
mm.
want exposure to gold as an instrument, you didn't have like a lot of financial instruments to take advantage of gold as an asset class. And ETF pretty much changed that because, once the ETF came out, you could just speculate this instrument without having to like do anything with the underlying, right? And gold is technically not a company which has a stock against it, so an ETF made a lot more sense than it being in any other shape or form. So that's the background, right? So now why Bitcoin ETF is a big thing. Once Bitcoin ETF, one of the Bitcoin ETF gets signed off, right? And again, the important thing to note here is there are ETFs already in places like Canada, and there are like similar products called ETPs, which is exchange traded products out of places like Germany, right? But US is the market when it comes to financial instruments and capital, right? So
Right.
getting an SEC approved Bitcoin ETF just makes it an instrument that now all your pension funds, all your institutional investors, accredited investors can get in and out of overnight. And all your investment banks and who make markets for your all traditional stocks and other ETFs and commodities, etc., can now start making markets on your ETFs as well. So the overnight switch in liquidity when it comes to the asset class just changes significantly, and you will have a lot more capital now wanting to participate. And because it's ETF and it's not like just a derivative or like a contract for difference, if you have like putting up like an ETF of say $1 billion, you will have to then aggregate and like custody $1 billion of Bitcoin as well behind it, right? So then there is an automatic organic demand that is generated. So it's great from that standpoint. I think people are very excited because of course, whoever is holding on to Bitcoin, it's great for their bags, right? And there's a lot more capital coming in. It makes it like a more authentic instrument, more capital flows. Once US gives a sign off, then many other countries will start doing it, right? I'm sure even India will like then see that as a path to kind of launch a Bitcoin mutual fund at some point, right? So yeah, so that's all there is.
So my question is, okay, if a large organization wants access to exposure to BTC, why can't they just do it off an? It's very lame, normie question, okay, from my end. But why can't they just buy it off an exchange right now, which has fiat rails?
Yeah, they can do that, and a lot of like family offices or unlisted corporations which are don't have like a regulatory burden on top of them in terms of what they don't invest into. They can do this. Like your players, like our Falcon X, for instance, or previously Genesis Trading under DCG. Like that's what they would be doing, right? A lot of these larger corporates and family offices would be buying it off them and custody it either with them or self custody, right? Where this matters is on the regulated institutions. Okay, now when you think of like pension funds or insurance funds, asset managers, retire, well, like wherever a lot of these retirement funds go, right? All your itself have to go through regulatory scrutiny in terms of whatever they invest into, right? So the closest they could come, I think, was to invest into venture funds that were, like your multi-coins or your paradigms and A16Cs. But they could not directly, like, I think, buy and hold Bitcoin because there is no regulatory clarity on that. Once an ETF comes in, then these guys like can buy Bitcoin. And just imagine if it's say, if I'm right on the numbers, if it's around say 40 trillion of these assets, 1% of that is like, or did I say 1% of 40 trillion is how much? 400 billion.
400 billion, yeah.
400 billion, right? Yeah. So like almost half of the one third of like market cap of crypto, or like half of Bitcoin, right? 1% of like that entire corpus coming in is that huge, right? And it's not unreasonable to expect that 1% of all that funds can be parked in like this type of an instrument, because if you look at how asset allocation also happens, then a portion is always allocated into emerging markets and high risk instruments, and this can be considered as part of that. But now they have an instrument which is regulator approved where they can park, right? So that's what kind of changes the dynamics altogether, and those people cannot invest today.
Right. Interesting. So it's almost like a regulatory play here that the government is okay with this, and this is the actual way of doing of buying your crypto, and large organizations that don't generally want to do any sort of thing that is not by the book, they can essentially go and buy get
Yeah.
exposure of an ETF. How does this functionally work, Prash? Like how does one get exposure to ETF? So essentially, I'm trying to understand. Okay, I go to a exchange. I go to like this portal. I buy a stock, and then that stock is in my
Yeah.
portfolio, and then I can liquidate that stock when I want to. Is this how
Yeah.
an ETF also works? Like generally,
Pretty
how
much.
does one
Yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
exposure
So
to?
it's it's like a mutual fund now, right? Once it becomes an ETF, it will be like an exchange traded product. So it will have like a ticker against it. It'll be maybe this will be like ETF.BTC. I'm just making it up, right? And then
Hmm.
now it will get integrated with like so then okay. So there are these market makers who make markets for like a traditional ETFs and stocks. They will start making markets on this. It will get like put up on like all your various platforms, right? Say for example Zerodha, right? I'm
Hmm.
assuming like our people would know about that, right? It is a product on Zerodha, and now if I want to take exposure in Zerodha, you can see a market on that on Zerodha, and then you just buy or sell based on that. It's as simple at that point. You don't even
Oh,
have
I
to, in
see.
my opinion, worry about any custody or any such thing. So, say in the US, this will be like your Charles Schwab or like your Vanguards or your Robin Hoods from a retail perspective, or it'll be like even like Morgan Stanley, like my like their private wealth management clients. They will be able to get exposure to this through their bankers as well.
Got it. Got it. That's okay. Okay, this is making so much more sense. So now exchange listing for crypto projects is no longer the end goal. Having an ETF is probably what every crypto project would want to do, that it has gotten that level of trust that now its distribution is essentially available through traditional means as well,
Yeah.
bringing more liquidity into the system. Do you see that happening? Why? Because right now I see Bitcoin as perhaps just the start to it. What stops, say, Ethereum or I don't know, just for the sake of discussion, Dogecoin becoming an ETF. But you get my point, right? Like, so why can't this also happen for other
Yeah, yeah,
cryptocurrencies?
yeah. Yeah, see, we are okay. So now we have to go into the reason as to like why Bitcoin ETF has been like not permitted by the SEC for so long, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And two main reasons there are that it's highly volatile without any tangible backing, like how you have
Hmm.
with gold or stocks and all that stuff. And the second thing is that they feel that the price is still highly susceptible to manipulation, and a lot of that manipulation is not something that can be noticed or even controlled with regulation, right? And again, I think those are fair points, right? You just saw like some random, not random, but a whale putting in a big buy position on Aave the other day. It just shot up the price, and then similarly it shot up the price of like compound synthetics and all that entire similar type of instruments. So again, who is doing that? Why is it happening? Like, is there like some insider information that is getting leaked? All of these things, like are very tough to determine. So even now, these questions will have to be answered. But because someone like a BlackRock and a Fidelity are wanting to do this ETF, I mean, these guys like pretty much rule the roost when it comes to Wall Street and the regulators, right? So the probability of them getting a sign off on this ETF is much higher than say Galaxy Digital or like Grayscale in the past, right? Just
Hmm.
because of how familiar the regulator is with these institutions.
You're right.
Now, outside of Bitcoin, the two concerns I mentioned, it just exponentially increases, right? In terms of
Right.
like non-clarity, and also volatility and like manipulation of price, etc. So I would
Hmm.
think that the asset class will have to mature a lot more for more ETFs to come out. Look, again, it's not a slam dunk still that Bitcoin ETF is happening. I think it will happen at some point. I think this is a great sign, and the probability has definitely increased. But it's still not happening, in my opinion, this year. It still has to go through a lot of loops and hurdles. The next one, obviously, in my opinion, will be Ethereum.
Right.
And then from there we'll have to see what kind of like qualifies. Maybe there will be a threshold that it has to be like of a certain market cap, so that manipulation can become less likely. And then once it crosses that threshold is when an ETF is permitted. Maybe I don't know. I'm just making that up, but it feels like a good parameter to gauge when an ETF could happen.
I think that's such a that's actually in line with crypto's philosophy, right? Like the point, I look at every crypto company, every crypto network as a DAO, right? It is a decentralized autonomous organization that does the work of, say, payments or social media or or that of a bank or that of compute and storage in the form of a network, as opposed to a management team working on it. It is essentially a large community of people that come together and keep the network afloat to perform that function. And value is distributed equitably to everybody instead of accruing in one place as a
Yeah.
centralized company. by that logic, I've always looked at networks as something that essentially have uncapped, uncapped growth, and then also at some level, being able to sustain itself for extended periods of time makes the network immortal, right? In the sense that it doesn't
Yeah,
have the same uh, life cycle as that of a company that would go work with a management team, not be able to keep up with time, and then over time fade into irrelevance and shut down, right?
yeah,
This would also mean that the ideally decentralized network, that which is extremely valuable, will have to reach that market cap at some point where the ETF actually starts to become a conversation where it is not susceptible to market manipulation because it's sufficiently decentralized, it's used
correct.
heavily, and then it essentially reaches that end goal where everyone outside of the bubble that is crypto can start getting
Yeah.
exposure to these products. I mean, it
Yeah, see,
seems
also
like.
the
Sorry, go ahead.
security of the network, right, becomes more and more, network becomes more and more secure the higher the market cap is, right? Because
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
so therefore, like, that is also, like, one way of looking at why an ETF only makes sense once it goes beyond, like, say, half a trillion of market cap, right? Probably. Right? See, sorry, what I was saying, the other problem here with respect to other names is that um they have deemed a lot of them as securities now, right? So
Hmm.
that itself has to be sorted before any of these guys can even think of, like, launching an ETF or any such thing, because Bitcoin has been categorically mentioned as not being a security, right? Only one which has that complete 100% chit, right? So it's probably easier for Bitcoin to kind of go through this journey first.
Right. So, I mean, I'm not saying that this is going to happen tomorrow, but it starts to kind of show how the networks world, the decentralized networks world, kind of merges with the real world, so to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so to say, right? I had two more questions. The other part is like with the emergence of ETFs, and let's assume that more tokens actually go through that ETF route, then almost all of these guys, your Vanguards, your Robinhoods, your Zerodhas, kind of become exchanges of sorts where I can go buy and sell these or get exposure to these crypto assets in a regulated fashion. What happens to the existing exchanges that currently live? Do they kind of fade into irrelevance, or do they still live on the fact that they have this large assortment of tokens that you can buy and trade and speculate on? How do you see that panning out over time?
Yeah. See, I mean, regulated players will definitely go through one of these established, regulated intermediaries, right? That's how they will go. But for like 99.9% of the other tokens, including Ether, which are not in an ETF format, you still have to go through your Coinbases and Binances, etc., to get through them. So again, the game doesn't change for these exchanges, because for most retail and also like the institutions that don't have to go through a regulated format, you have to come to these exchanges. Maybe the Bitcoin, even for Bitcoin, they can do that still, right? Especially if you care about self custody. So I don't think much changes for them. If anything, if you get a lot more regulatory clarity, then more masses will want to turn up. They will, maybe start with Bitcoin. They'll get familiar with more altcoins, and then they'll start going to these exchanges for exposure in that. So I think it might actually work in their favor in the long term.
Got it. Got it. Last question. What's all this fuss about BlackRock?
Yeah, see, BlackRock, is like what that. I don't know what's the analogy I can give here, but if but it's huge, dude. I mean, it's just one of those mammoths in the room, and it commands a lot of attention and mind space from Wall Street and also from the regulators. They manage some trillions of assets. They have been in the business for like many decades, and they they have, I think, put out like some 575 or such ETF proposals in the past, and only one has been rejected in like 2007. So their track record is just impeccable, right? So this ratio of just one rejection from like close to 600 applications is what the big deal is about BlackRock filing for a Bitcoin ETF. Now I think the
Hmm.
pressure is very much truly on the SEC. that how do you tell no to someone like BlackRock, which commands so much attention, and you'll have to like give really good reasons to kind of not to say no to someone like BlackRock. Yeah, so I think, I mean, also the thing is, it's not like BlackRock just woke up one day and decided they wanted to file this application. They have been going through this process, and I'm sure it was like a multi-month process, maybe even a year, of them putting everything together to finally submit this application, right? It's just funny that in first half of this year there has been so much chatter around regulators wanting to cripple crypto, and and then suddenly out of the blue, BlackRock has come out with their own ETF application, who are like in bed pretty much with the regulator. So of course, it gives rise to a lot of conspiracy theories. Not something I want to go out there, but it's just the timing is very interesting.
Prash, I wish you did go into that, but I guess we all have day jobs
Yeah. Yeah.
and
See, one other thing I would like to mention, we didn't cover it here, but this is like more philosophical and comes to the ethos of crypto. Okay, so if you take gold as an ETF as a standard, what had happened is once gold ETF gets set up and gold becomes more regulated, and even like a lot of central banks also hold gold now, right? So most of the circulating supply is held within ETFs or like your central banks, right? What that means is that it has pretty much become an institutional product, right? And also the price discovery and like the price management is pretty much maintained by the institutions now. So what drawing a parallel from there, what it means is that once an ETF is approved, a lot of masses come in, retail cannot compete. Okay, then Bitcoin has pretty much become an institutional product at that point, and then you'll probably have like significant portions of your Bitcoin, being held with these institutions. Now, I don't know. You like the true test for diamond hands, as we call it, is probably once these players come in. Because if they come in, if Bitcoin goes to 100K, 150K, I'm pretty sure 99% of retail is just selling out of it, right? And then it pretty much just becomes an institutional product. Then what does it mean to the ethos of Bitcoin at that time? Are we like even considering Bitcoin as like something that can become, a reserve currency or like a medium of exchange, or have we just become selfish and sold it to these institutions who are just now then using it, whichever way they want as a store of value, right? So that is a fundamental question. I don't think anyone is asking, but definitely worth spending a few minutes there to see where this is going in terms of like Bitcoin as a price versus Bitcoin as its ethos.
which is very strange, right? Okay, the one part of it is not kind of becoming an exchange, like a centralized product. The other part of it is also that Bitcoin is permissionless. This should be allowed. Like there's nothing stopping BlackRock or the powers that be to come and come and do this. Right? Like there's nothing written in the
Yeah.
rule book that this shouldn't be allowed. So there's this interesting conflict that is constantly happening in the intellectual circles of crypto. That on the one hand, oh, the banks are taking over, and the other hand is like, who stopped them, right? Like there was
Yep.
never really anything that got in the way of banks adopting this and taking it forward. So I guess you can't have it both ways in that sense
Yeah,
is
I
what
mean,
I'm.
the only way you can stop this if you want to is not selling out of your Bitcoin if you have it, right? And using it for payments, and like still encouraging more people to like buy before this becomes out of bounds for most people, and holding on to it, right? And of course, it's a very philosophical and like utopian thing, right?
Mm.
At that point. So that's the only way. Otherwise, we can.
Your first principles thinking keeps it coming back. Use tokens for what they were meant to do, as opposed to only speculate on it. I guess that if there's one message that you take out of it from this episode, it could be that. Last question to you, Prash. Bitcoin ETF, net good or net bad?
Oh, price wise good, ethos wise bad.
Oh. Well, on that note, I think we should call it a day. Prash, it's been awesome. Thank you for the primers on how financial systems work and how Bitcoin seems to be slowly kind of getting into it. We'll be back with more in the coming days, and you'll probably see our faces a lot more in the upcoming episode. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. And if you have doubts, look at the show notes, and you can reach out to us separately on Spotify and soon on YouTube as well. So with that, these are the normies signing off. Prash, pleasure as
Thank
always.
you.
See you again.